Hello, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Just going to give it a few minutes to let people get logged on. If you are joining us, if you want to drop in the chat where you're tuning in from, that's always really fun to see. We're just going to give it a minute or two to let everyone get logged on. Welcome. Feel free to drop in the chat where you're tuning in from, and we're going to get started in just another minute or two. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. We are here to celebrate this beautiful book, Homage by Chris Scott, and he will be in conversation with Ruby DeLuna. Before I bring them on, I'm just going to give a brief introduction. I'm Zoe Friesen. I'm the events manager here at Booklarder. We are a community cookbook store located in Seattle, Washington. We sell all 100% cookbooks and food writing. Oh, hi from Queen Anne. Someone is tuning in from just over the hill there. Fantastic. Let's see. We have, of course, been doing a lot more virtual events, as you can imagine, over the last couple of years, and we're beginning to branch out into some in-person events as well. But we are really excited to continue these virtual events too. It's so wonderful to be able to connect with authors from all over and interviewers from all over, although today Ruby is joining us from Seattle as well, which is fantastic. But we love being able to have these virtual talks so people can also tune in from all over. So we'll definitely be continuing these. The talk will be recorded. It will be posted up on our YouTube channel within about 48 hours. So if you end up having to jump off early, or if you want to send the replay to a friend or anything like that, it will be available for you there. I do have the live transcript turned on, so if you wanted to turn that on or turn that off, you can just control that at the bottom of your screen. And then we will also be leaving some time for Q&A towards the end of the hour. So any questions that you have, I just ask for Chris, I just ask that you pop those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there. And we will definitely make sure that those get answered. You can support the talk by purchasing the book Homage from Booklarder. We do have signed copies available for you, so those are available in our shop. And I will go ahead and drop the link to that in the chat for you as well. Okay, well, without further ado, I will go ahead and turn things over to Chris and Ruby.
Hello, everyone. And thank you so much for having me. My name is Ruby DeLuna, and I'm so thrilled to be speaking with Chef Chris Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. And I'm really excited to chat with you. And I've also bookmarked some of the recipes that I definitely want to try. But what really drew me to your book too were some of the stories that you shared. So, but before we delve into that, I'm often curious about how are people drawn to cooking. So I'm curious for you, what was it? When was the moment that drew you to cooking, and what were your early memories of that?
Yeah. Thank you for everything. So glad to be here and everything. For me, cooking, I always say cooking is where I lose myself and find myself all over again. You know, it's definitely an artistic approach to me more than it is work or more than it is actual cooking. You know, it's where I'm able to truly express, you know, how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. I'm inspired by the seasons outside, or inspired by music, or just by the overall vibe of life in general. Starting off at a young age, you know, I was always in or, you know, close to the kitchen while my grandmother was there. Her influence for sure was certainly powerful, you know, and then throughout the years, just various mentors have sort of molded the way that I think about cooking. You know, that there are some, you know, that will teach you the technical parts of it on how to saute, how to braise, how to bake, you know, the technical parts of it. But then there are those that kind of teach you the why you're doing what you do, you know, and for me, that was more of an impact on my life, you know, of like, why am I doing this? What is it about this craft that keeps me coming back? You know, because the pay is low. I'm on my feet 24/7. I hardly ever see my loved ones. You know, what is it about this that I love so much? You know, and I guess in the end, it was just about, and these days it's so cliche, but it's so true. You know, that food is the connective. You know, food has the power of bringing us all together. You know, people often ask sometimes, what's your favorite tool in the kitchen? And I guess they would always expect me to answer with like some fancy knife or whatever, but I tell them it's my kitchen table, because it's there where people actually come and talk, and it's there where I can actually prep, and it's there where I can, you know, decorate it or do whatever. Like that kitchen is, that table is where it all happens.
It sounds like that your grandmother was a big influence, kind of got you started.
Yeah.
Lit that fire for, you know, your interest in cooking.
Yes, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, just her, and it almost got to where food played the backdrop, to where it was her spirit and the love that she had for family, for God, for all of these things that kind of bled into you, you know, just from you being in the room and listening to her speak or listening to her talk to other people. You know, yes, she may have been cooking all the while, you know, but it was her actions and her look upon life that was the real inspiration.
So what made you decide to pursue this as a career? Like you said, like there are a lot of sacrifices, right? You're on your feet.
Yeah.
You know, but why?
Yeah. So when I left home, you know, I mean, I was always cooking at home, and then I left home and I was going to college to be a school teacher. But I was always working in restaurants at the same time, and mainly because I knew that I could eat for free. You know, when you're a college student and you're out on your own, it's kind of hard to make ends meet. You know, the pay is low, but at least I was always surrounded by good food, you know, to where I could sit in the corner and eat, you know, a well-balanced meal all the time, you know. But then after graduation, or after I left school, um, you know, I kind of was still gravitated towards that craft. You know, I probably taught for, you know, a hot second, left that behind, and I had some colleagues that were saying, you know what, why don't you just come back to the restaurant? And then once I did do that, you know, then I kind of went in full on. I went in with both feet, and haven't left since. I've been cooking now for, my goodness, 35 something years.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. To your mom's chagrin, right? Like
Yes.
that you gravitated toward that.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, my goodness. In the beginning, she was not having it at all, because in her mind, like it wasn't a craft that would keep me not from moving back home. You know, like, why are you doing this? You're not going to get paid, and you damn sure aren't going to come back living in this house. You know, you need to go out and do your own thing.
Well, your cookbook celebrates your roots, okay, and this includes your childhood in Amish country.
Yep.
And for me, as I did not grow up in the States, so for me, learning a little bit about Amish food was, you know, was new to me. So so for those who may not be familiar with Amish food, how would you describe that?
Um, I, I would say that the way that it tastes, so if you picture some of the German and Dutch food where you have a lot of sweet and sour, you know, a lot of chutneys, a lot of jams, a lot of preserves, you have breads, but then you always have the apple butters or different components, of a dish that are high in acid or high in sweet or high in vinegar, So a lot of the Amish soul food, as far as taste is concerned, is probably the best way to describe that. So even in the book where I do the lemonade fried chicken, so everybody in the South will always do some type of sweet tea brine. Here I'm using lemonade. Now, when I say lemonade, I don't mean like country time, to where it's super sweet and everything. It's a lot of lemon juice, but there's also hot sauce and buttermilk, some sugar, but it's more lingering on the savory edge to it. But when you bite into it, it's like shards of brightness. I believe there was a time when the New York Times, when they visited the restaurant, and they described it as shards of sunshine, breaking through the crispy skin or something like that.
So what you're describing then, they're not merely condiments, like they are not just like the supporting cast, but they're also a main star too, in the cuisine.
Oh yeah. I mean, whenever they will make anything, there's always a little bit of extra sugar, a little bit of extra vinegar, a little bit of something like that, there's, to me, it's just brighter components as far as tastes.
And so then when you say Amish soul food, could you describe that then?
So when you look at soul food is regional. Depending on where you are in the country, that influence will bleed its way into the Southern food, because Black people are everywhere. And the one thing that we brought with us is our food culture. And after the slaves were freed, we, relocated to various parts of the country. So for example, if you go to Virginia, where my people are from, Tidewater people, you have more coastal flavors. You have a lot of shad roe, crabs, in that area. And that kind of stuff is incorporated into the food. You keep on going south, South Carolina, North Carolina, the Gullah Geechee community, where you have more okra, you have more African influence. There's watermelon, deeper south kind of flavors into it. Keep on going south. Now we're in the panhandle of Florida, the south of, Louisiana, more Creole influence in that Southern food. Keep on going west, some barbecue culture, but then you come all the way back up to the north, where I'm from, and you have more German, Dutch, and Amish influence. So when they made that journey and relocated in Pennsylvania, where my people are from, 2-3 generations after that, that food fused its way together. Very similar to the tamale culture in the Delta region, where you have Black people that are actually making tamales that were influenced by the Mexicans, and just from them, coming together, being together, cooking together, now you have Black establishments in the Delta region that are making tamales. So it's like that, to where you just take one part of your culture and you just move it to this side of the road with this type of people and environment and culture. A couple years down the road, now you'll have something that's a little bit different. Even here in Brooklyn, in a neighborhood called Sunset Park, you have Chinese and Mexican, to where now there's a cuisine that's coming out that they call Chino Latino, and maybe in 15 years from now, there'll be a cookbook that's about that, but it's just regional food based on where you are, that has the influence mixed into what it kind of started with.
And that's what I love about food, talking about food, is that it's definitely a dynamic thing. It doesn't stay the same, because we as people, we do not stay in one place. And the beauty of it too is that when you have cultures interacting together, like it, it leads to creations of just like new things, like really interesting flavors. And when and at first glance, like you would think, okay, there aren't many similarities between Amish cooking and soul food, right? But in your book, you note that there are similarities. Would you care to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
And
sure. So
give some
even
examples? Yeah.
yeah, you look at the people, and that's probably the best place to start, and to finish,
Yeah.
because both of them are masters at turning something from nothing. You know what I mean? Like, for example, when you talk about the low parts of the pig, where that was the food that was given to Black folk back in the day, and they would turn something, from the spleen, from the livers, from the heart, and the Amish the same way. You look at the sauce that they make, you look at the scrapple and things that they make with that. Like I always say, why do the French get to have all the fun with foie gras and the charcuterie? The blacks and the Amish have been doing that for centuries. But it's just their way of sustaining themselves. Through triumph and failure, and you could see it a lot in their food. You can see it a lot in their communities, how they build. So you have those comparisons right there, and I think that just the same way that I was talking about how outside forces kind of inspire me and how I cook, the same thing with them. You have all these outside things that occur in their parallel lives that reflect how they cook as well. Making something, from the most basic, taking a potato, for example, and, not only turning it into a beautiful stew, but turning it into a dessert, or even a nice bread, or even a donut. It's incredible.
Can you mentioned scrapple. Can you describe what that is for? I didn't know about scrapple until I read your book. So can you, for those who may not know what it is, can you describe?
The best way, and I always tell people this because people will come into the restaurant, and rather than tell them what's in it right away, because then they'll be turned off, I always say it's almost like a very low key kind of pate, So if you eat pate, chances are you might like scrapple. If you like foie gras, chances are you might like scrapple. One of the techniques that I do, I'll give them a little piece, and then they'll always ask, what is it? What's in it? And my only question is, do you eat pork? They say yes. I give it to them, and then after they eat it, then I'll tell them it's scrapple. And then if they want to know what's in it, then I can tell them that as well. I mean, if you kind of tell them all the ingredients that's in it right away, of course you might get turned off. I remember trying to turn my wife onto it back in Philadelphia years ago, and she was just so disgusted by what was in it. I think we got into a big fight, that same day, like over some scrapple of all things, but to me, I was raised on it. I love it. It's if you cook it right, it's crispy on the outside and kind of nice and creamy, that creamy pate-ish on the inside. People from Philly will eat it either with a fried egg on top, a little bit of ketchup. You can put it in a Kaiser roll. That's how they do it. Some people do that. And some people even go the sweet route by putting either some jam or jelly or some syrup.
All right. So it's not strictly like a eaten like a spread, but it could be like its own thing with the
its own thing. Yeah. Even in the book, you'll see it with a little bit of the okra chow chow, that I have there, you know, because you always want some kind of sweet, savory component to go with it because it's so fatty that you're going to need some acid. You know, it's almost like when you eat a piece of foie gras torchon, you know, and you have like the pickled cherries that are next to it with your glass of champagne. So now you got scrapple with the pickled okra and maybe a cold beer,
Hmm.
you know.
So has your wife accepted or gotten to like scrapple?
She has. I think I think she more tolerates it, but my children, they love it,
Mm,
which is great.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's so thank you for explaining and describing some of the foods that you grew up with and that's in your cookbook. And you mentioned in your book that there was a time where you didn't want to be known as a Black chef who cooked the usual, Southern foods, right? And but then you changed your mind at one point. Like, I'd like for you to talk about that journey from resisting the idea of cooking, serving food that you grew up with to
Yep.
embracing it. Can you
Yep.
talk about like what changed and
Sure.
yeah.
Absolutely. So again, I've been cooking for 35 years or so, and back in the beginning of my career, fine dining is where it was at. Even still, in some veins of culinary society, fine dining is still where it's at. So and those chefs, those restaurants, some of them frown upon, you know, comfort food or food that they would consider to be beneath them, you know. And coming up in the industry, I never really embraced my Southern food background because I knew already how people in mainstream fine dining society looked at that food. They looked at it like it was staff meal. They looked at it like it was beneath them. They looked at it like there was no real technique, nothing about it. You know, they believed in all the stigmas of it being unhealthy. They thought that all that it was just fried chicken and fried this and fried that, you know, with sugary sweets and, you know, red velvet, you know, which is completely not true, you know. So I didn't want to embrace that and become that chef when I was still trying to rise up on the ranks by doing other people's food or that European food that I was doing for so many years, you know. But because I was that Black guy in those kitchens, no matter how good I was, no matter how hard I worked, I would still never get the love or the respect, you
Mm,
know, of being a good chef, of being a good worker, of doing all that. During all of that time, I was, because of all the stress that's in kitchens. I'm sure that you've probably heard stories about how restaurant work is for cooks, but I was drinking heavily. You
mm,
know, I was an alcoholic for a large part of my professional
mm,
career. And then once I began to get sober
mm,
and realize and reclaim who I was, that I was able to really reflect on the food and that part of me as well. You know, so first I was fixing me. And then once I was getting right, then I was able to bring in other aspects of me, which included the food of my childhood, the food of my background, the food of my people, and that culture. And once I was able to really embrace that, I was literally cooking some of the best food
mm,
of my life, you know, and not only cooking it, but I was able to inspire. I was able to lift up. I was able to open doors. I was able to create pathways for the next generation of chefs. You know, like it was so much larger than just the food, you know,
mm,
like it almost became a movement, so to speak, you know, and it all felt natural and it all flowed, you know, so beautifully, you know, and then I was able to truly embrace that and me uh, and just disregard, what other chefs may think or say or whatever it is that they feel about this food. And I would say, like, certainly over the last 10 years, Black food is less and less sidelined as it used to be. There are still people that still strongly believe that it's beneath them, that it's not a viable, source, that it's a niche, thing. It's just a phase, and there are people that believe that, but it's here to stay, and I don't mind holding the torch proudly, for while I'm here, because it was here before me. It'll be here long after I'm gone. So if I can hold that torch proudly and just kind of light the way for other people behind me to do more with it, because we're standing on the shoulders of Patrick Clark and Edna Lewis and all of those pioneers, and we don't want to, in so many words, we just don't want to let them down or have their legacy be forgotten,
Hmm. And it's really yeah, it is sad that it's looked down on, or yeah, because I remember talking about this with a former chef about this, and one of the things that she said was that, we've been cooking for a long time. We were the ones who, who cook all these good foods, like, forget, Southern cuisine, but like real food, proper food that was served at parties,
Yeah.
and is just not being, we weren't recognized. And so I'm glad to see that slowly it's coming to the fore, that it's getting the recognition that
Yep.
it deserves. What about, I'm curious, especially when we talk about recognition, about I can't help but think, of the events of the past 2 to 3 years, the pandemic, the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and all that. All these things have really, it's more than just those events, right? It really forced a lot of us to kind of reassess, gosh, what are our values, right? What are our priorities? And I wonder, how did these events affect you, and how did this affect, your priorities, especially as a chef?
Yep. In the book, page 1, I talk about that, and I kind of started off by saying, what did you learn about yourself while all that was happening? Because sort of as we were kind of coming out, you heard people, because the world was moving so quickly, and you had all this activity that was happening. And then all of a sudden things stopped. We were forced to stay home. We were actually able to sort of physically deflate and finally pay attention to the world that was happening all around us. And you see all the injustices of various people, finally, having a voice. So my question to the world in my book, page 1, is, now that basically the coast is clear, now that we're coming back to some form of reality, what is it that we've learned about ourselves? And you see different restaurateurs back into I want to make my restaurant a safe place. I want it to be where chefs can connect. I want it to be, a place where sexism and racism and all that's out the window. I want to be able to address it, and change things, and be an advocate for change. And I'm seeing now that was sort of short-lived, in some veins. because a lot of people walk the walk, but I've been in kitchens, all across this country where it's almost like you're back to 1994, to where behind closed doors, there's still just as much racism, there's still just as much sexism, there's still just as much drugs and drinking and all of that. But in front, out to the world, they're like, oh yeah, we're making change. We're treating our employees differently, but they're not. It was very short-lived that I guess it was the hip thing, to be like, oh yes, yeah, we're a part of this changing generation. Now it's our moment, to make things different, but now that we're sort of 2 years out, I see things kind of going back into the old ways, and it's a shame, but on a positive note is that I think that people are realizing where the good places are to work and where the messed up places are to work as well, because the places that have changed are still on that path. And the people that have kind of BS'd their way through, and acted like they were changing in the beginning, but behind closed doors, you still got chefs screaming and talking racist stuff and sexist stuff. People are going to know, what, this is not the place for me. This is not the place where I want to grow, where I feel like I can be my true self, to where I can grow professionally and be around people that are going to uplift me and teach me. They're only going to be in places like that where it's not going to feel safe, to where you're not going to learn anything, and to where eventually you're going to want to leave, and quite frankly, you might even want to leave the business altogether, by thinking, what, maybe this cooking thing isn't for me. To me, cooking, it's one of the biggest ways that we can express love for each other. If I even make you a piece of toast with butter and brew you a cup of tea, to where you sit with me and I give it to you, to me, that's an act of love, and if I'm teaching the next generation that as the foundation of everything else that we're doing, I want that to be the driving force. I want that to be why you're coming to work. I want that to be why you want to learn to butcher, to sear, to saute, to bake, because you want to be able to make these things as a platform to do the greater good, which is to feed each other and to love each other and to respect one another. Like that's my mantra for days, but there's just so much, like I said in the book, how have you changed? What have you learned about yourself? Because those that have faked the funk in the beginning by saying, you know what, I'm gonna change things, I'm gonna make it different, and then they switch back into their old ways, it's those are the people that should be looking at themselves in the mirror.
I know one of the things that I remember too was that people started to say, started putting out lists of Black-owned businesses, and they would say, "Oh, go support them, go support them." And for a moment there, it looked like, oh, yay, like people were patronizing a lot of. All of a sudden, people were like, "Oh, I didn't know that was a Black-owned business," and all that. But here we are, and I'm not sure. I think it might be worth, revisiting that and asking Black-owned businesses, hey, how are you doing? Like, business been the same? And I wonder for you, what have you seen in your neighborhood, or, in your part of town? Like, are people continuing to support Black-owned businesses, or continuing to walk that talk?
I think since the beginning of time, like Black folks will always help promote other Black people. in my area of Harlem, there's my place, there's Melba's, there's the Harlem Biscuit Company. There are other Black-owned businesses a lot within my area. There's Red Rooster, you know, and we constantly promote and hype up each other because it's never a competition. It's never like, oh, I need you to come here because I don't want you to go there. I want you to come to the area where we all are so that you can be a part of the community. One day you can hang out with Marcus. One day you can hang out with me. One day you can hang out with Melba. One day you can get another biscuit, you know, at the other biscuit company. It's all good because I want everyone to succeed, because once we all start failing, people start leaving, you know. So it's important that all of us in this area succeed and do well. The question is that not only who supports Black business, but who promotes it. You know, are there outside companies? Are there PR firms, you know, that maybe used to promote Black owned because it was the in thing? Are they doing it now? You know, I think that's a very good question. Is now 2 years later, you know, where are we at with that?
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that we have enough time for folks to ask questions. But before we do that, I just one last question from me,
Yeah.
which is, you know, I see this cookbook as your love letter to your family, to your ancestors, and also like a family book for your children and for the generations later. But I wonder too how you would like readers to use this book, or how would you like them to, or what would you like the readers to take away from this book?
Many things, many things. I want them, you know, first and foremost, to be able to cook from it and have fun with it and share it, you know, with their family and their loved ones. I want the stories to, you know, to kind of hit home, because the one thing that we have in common is family. It doesn't matter, you know, if you're white, you're Black, you're Asian, you're Puerto Rican, it doesn't matter. The one thing that we have in common is family. And some of these stories are relatable. Almost all of them are, you know. It's also important for people to understand that soul food is a regional thing. And, you know, it's not always just fried chicken, ribs, watermelon, and red velvet. You know, there are other parts, strong parts of soul food that are there, and a lot of it, believe it or not, is healthy. You know, a lot of it is agriculture and vegetable based. You know, like a basic meal back in the day would be taking vegetables from your own garden. If you were lucky to have like a chicken bone or whatever to create like a very nice or flavorful stew, you know, then you would make a vegetable stew, and then you would pour that over top of a piece of day-old cornbread, you know, and that's really what we ate back then. There would be variations of that, maybe with dumplings or a loaf of bread, or, you know, different components, but we weren't eating fried chicken and ribs and, you know, all that stuff on a daily, you know. And I think that this book is really going to finally just get that story out there once and for all, but also celebrate family and, you know, and tradition, you know, and all of those things coming together.
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
having just returned from vacation, I was eyeing all the different vegetable dishes.
Yeah,
And
right.
I have my eye on the cauliflower rice.
Yeah,
And then there's the Swiss chard stuffed with rice too. That
yeah,
looked,
yeah,
looked
yep,
interesting. Yeah.
Even the cauliflower rice, it's sort of like a play on rice and beans.
Yeah.
You know, and almost every culture has their version of
Mhm.
rice and beans, you know, and now you have one that's, you know, in the book.
Yeah. Is there any particular dish in here that's like your signature dish or your favorite?
I would say, as far as signature piece is concerned, and this is, you know, that the people have put on me, probably the chicken and biscuits. you know, I'm pretty well known for that, you know. But as far as my favorite in the book, there's a recipe for fried potatoes,
Oh,
Nana's fried potatoes, and that's my favorite piece of the whole book.
I'll have to try that.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see. There are any questions? Not seeing any right now. Let's see. Do you have any questions, Zoe?
Hello. Let's see here. Yeah, it looks like our audience is being a little bit shy. So,
Hi, yeah.
encourage everyone to pop any questions you might have into that Q&A. But let's see here. I was, of course, also going to ask about a favorite recipe. That's always a great question. So I'm excited to try those potatoes too. I was going to ask about some of the recipes that caught my eye in the book too. One was, and my green screen is going to make this kind of hard to share, but this is the green, let's see, the salad with the cornbread panzanella, which looks absolutely delicious.
Yeah. And even in that recipe, feel free to swap out any of the greens. You know, it's basically the cornbread, you know, that you're going to toast up, and any kind of like wet component that will kind of play just like the Italian panzanella salad. But in this case, you're using cornbread. So feel free to mix and match, you know, tomatoes, roasted tomatoes, any vinaigrette, any type of leafy greens, anything, you know.
I absolutely love that idea. Yeah, I love the idea of using the cornbread in more of a panzanella preparation and with that buttermilk ranch dressing. That looks so good.
Yeah.
I was looking at this book with a coworker earlier today, and we were also looking at this the charred radicchio salad with the cola, boiled peanuts, and Amish cheddar. That almost feels like it has so many components from different, you know, from all the things you've talked about, which I love.
Yeah. That's actually a thing. So down south, there are parts of the South where people will put peanuts in their Coca-Cola, and then they'll drink them out. So you have that sweet, salty kind of effect.
I heard of that. Yeah. It is a thing. Okay.
It's a thing.
I love that. That sounds so good. And there's so much cola in kind of like in a lot of like Southern cooking. I was telling Chris and Ruby before we started that I grew up in North Carolina when I was a young kid. So I also love, I love Southern cooking, and I do feel that it's misunderstood. You know, it's just thought of as being like one thing that's so heavy, but it's so regional and it can be so fresh and very like farm to table. But of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the tater tot casserole, which is also one that looks so delicious.
And that's the one that people should make for the kids, you know, because that one you won't get any pushback whatsoever.
Oh my gosh, it looks absolutely delicious. And again, it kind of it's intertwining almost what I think of as more of like Midwestern food, you know, very much that kind of casserole or hot dish type thing, which is so cool.
Let's
see what else I'm marking.
I guess also red velvet cornmeal madeleines. Is it really what I think it is? Like, is it in the shape of a madeleine?
It is.
Oh my God.
It's in the form of a madeleine. And I take that, and sometimes I'll put like chicken liver mousse, and you can even use it as like a vehicle as a canapé, you know, put whatever kind. You can put pimento cheese. You can put you can dip it in the Old Bay remoulade, or like I like to do it with the chicken liver mousse.
Yeah. Ooh. I love that. And I was looking too at your chicken and waffles my style, which has I don't know if the photo will come through, but has the chicken liver mousse and the fried chicken hearts. And I love how this is such like a combination of, you know, you've talked about kind of expressing different parts of yourself, but that fine dining part is a big part of who you are too. You know, that's a big part of your history too. And just kind of presenting that elevated interpretation of, you know, chicken and waffles, which is such a classic. soul food dish.
Wow.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
I love that.
Such a great story behind it. I think for people that really are into chicken and waffles, buy the book just for the story behind that one.
Okay, I love that. We got into that one yet. Let's see. The lemonade and buttermilk fried chicken was another one that caught my eye flipping through.
That's a classic one. That's the one that I
yeah.
did on Top Chef.
Oh, cool.
Oh.
Yeah, I'd love to
Yeah.
hear. It almost has like almost a double brine, or like a brine and then a marinade. I'd love
Yep.
to hear you
Yep.
kind of talk
Yep.
about that a little bit.
So you have your bone-in chicken, you know,
Mhm.
and then you have, it's basically lemon juice and cumin and hot sauce, sugar, some salt, some spices, and you brine your chicken in that for about a day. You take it out and then you marinate it in buttermilk with a little bit more hot sauce. But the
Wow.
buttermilk at that point is now acting as a tenderizer, you know.
Okay.
And so then, right, I would bring that container up and leave that refrigerated up on the line. And then to order, we would take it out of the buttermilk into the dredge and fry it right then and there, you know, so that you're really getting, you know, that lemony, you know, tender buttermilk tang, hot sauce, you know, it's really bright in flavor, you know, like I was talking about before, about like the sweet, sour, acid kind of, you know, that I find Amish food to be, you know. So now you have this fried chicken with all of those flavor components.
I love that. And just that idea of something that really has that kind of tang that really balances sort of the super richness and crispiness of a fried chicken. That's definitely one that's on my list.
Sure.
This is making me hungry.
I know, it's trouble. I'd love to hear about this soft shell crab recipe too. That's not something that we really have out here,
Right.
soft shell crabs, but yeah.
And that one really talks, you know, to the Virginia, to the Tidewater, you know, that with peas, you know, there. So you could basically take that pea and create any kind of salad with it, you know, but that crab, you know, really speaks to my Virginia roots, you know, because you go there, you go crabbing, you know, you can catch that shad roe, you know, there's all that coastal stuff, especially in the warm months, you know, when soft shells are in season. And that dish in particular, you know, really speaks to that area.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. Let's see. We're kind of right in between seasons here, in between summer and fall, winter. I'd love to ask kind of what is a great like summer go-to from the book, and then maybe what's a more cozy, you know, winter or fall dish that you can recommend.
Yep. I think that the radicchio salad, you know, definitely goes great, you know, for the colder months, because it's that bitter green, you know, with like the sweet salty peanuts, and then you're adding that char to it, you know. That's a good one for the fall. The panzanella, definitely great for the warmer months. Chicken is great all year round. Cornbread, good all year round. The peach cobbler is definitely great in the summertime, but you can actually swap out. You can swap out the fruit for quince, pear, or apple, which are now in season right now.
Yep.
So you could take that same batter, you know, and incorporate that into either pears, quince, apples, Concord grape, whatever you like.
Oh, I love that idea with quince. That's such an underappreciated fruit, I feel like.
Exactly, I know.
That's great. Let's see. What are some of your go-to cookbooks right now, other than your own? What are you, or do you find that you really, I know we were talking about your cookbook collection earlier, but just curious if you have any favorites.
I guess some of my favorites over the last couple of years, I like Victuals with Ronnie Lundy. You know, that's a great one. Horn by Matt Horn, the Horn Barbecue. Black Smoke.
Oh yeah.
Black Smoke with Adrian Miller. Rise, the new one by Marcus Samuelson
Yeah.
is a great one. Gregory Gourdet's new joint.
Oh my gosh. So
Right?
good.
I was
So
just at
good.
Cannes last week. I was in Portland and I swung through and ate over there at Cannes.
Oh,
Good
wow.
stuff. Adrian's new books, Sunday Bests.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, is
Yeah.
I mean, I think that this season is probably one of the best for cookbooks in a long, long, long time. And not just saying that because I'm in the mix, but there's some really good stuff that's out there. I love the Juneteenth cookbook,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
that just hit. You got Tanya Holland's that's
Yeah.
about to drop next month.
Looking forward to that one too. Yeah.
Michael
Definitely.
Twitty's that just dropped a couple weeks ago. I mean, there's some great ones out there right now.
Oh, so many great recs. That is very,
Mhm.
very true. I'm curious, how do you cook at home, or do you find time to cook at home much nowadays?
It's so funny. Like I almost rarely cook at home, you know, only because I'm just so used to cooking in a professional kitchen that when you cook in a New York City, you know, home
Yeah.
spot, you know, if you use one pot, it just seems like it makes your whole kitchen dirty, you
Yeah.
know. And even though I love to cook, but cooking at home or cleaning up at home is the worst. Like it just seems like you cook one egg, and when you're done, it looks like, you know, like the whole kitchen exploded or something.
Crime scene. Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So it's, that part turns me off from cooking at home.
Yeah.
But
It's
you
tough
know,
when you spend your time doing that in the restaurant too, to
right,
have
right,
that
right,
energy
right.
for it.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a question about this recipe for cheese grits with jerk pork. I
Mhm.
was looking at it earlier and it looks like you cook the pork in a grill, like a barbecue grill, correct? Is
You can
this,
smoke it. Yep.
yeah, can I cook that in the oven
You can. You can.
instead?
You absolutely can.
It's getting
If
cold, so.
Yeah, and so you can smoke it in a
Okay.
grill outside, or you can do it like on high heat. Because as long as you get like a good sear on
Mhm.
the meat, then you can put it in a pan and just cover it and braise it. You know,
Oh,
or roast it with a little bit of liquid wine, water, stock, whatever you choose. You know, and then just kind of let that go. And then once it's done, just pick it apart, and then you just take your picked meat and sear that in the pan or on a flat top just to get it crispy, and then you lay that on top of your grits.
I would definitely want to try making that too. Sounds nice and hearty for, autumn,
Absolutely, yeah, yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you could even add more of the apple, so you can have like pork stock and cider and use that as your braising liquid. So you have more, flavors. You could add allspice in there and rosemary or juniper, especially out where you guys are. You have all those spruce trees.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
You can just walk down the street and just take a handful and put that in the pot.
Ooh, that's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah.
It almost feels, I realize it's still September, but in my mind, I think it's already like November. So I'm wondering if you have any recipes that you would think of for like a Thanksgiving type of meal.
Yeah.
Well, the spoon bread for sure.
Okay.
That
Yep.
that's in there. Of course, you got to do a couple of the chow chows, because chow chows basically go with anything. And the beautiful thing about chow chows is that you can make them from whatever, and if you wanted to do more of a Thanksgiving-ish themed, you could take fresh cranberries and make a chow chow.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah.
From that, chow chow, pickled red onion, maybe some juniper berry in there.
Oh, yeah.
I love
Right.
that, because I'm definitely in the, more tart school of thought where cranberry sauce is concerned. So yeah, I think making some sort of a cranberry chow chow, or even just mixing it up with a couple different, couple different things from the sweet and the sour chapter. Sounds absolutely amazing.
Even that spooned over a piece of cornbread.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Nice
gosh.
buttery
sounds so
cornbread
good.
with a cranberry chow chow. That
That
sounds,
sounds amazing.
that does sound great.
What about for a main, like a non-traditional Thanksgiving main, or just like a good main for like a celebration? I mean, there's so many great candidates in here, but just
Right.
curious.
I'm always open to like that ham goose turkey
Yeah,
kind of thing. Like
Mm.
I'm not such a stickler on turkey for Thanksgiving.
same.
I'll do
Yeah,
ham,
yeah,
or I'll do goose,
Mhm.
yeah,
or I'll do duck, you know.
yeah.
I like to switch it up.
I
And I
love
think
that.
that's one of the things that inspires my friends to come over, is
Yeah,
that they never know what they're going to get until they walk in, you know.
I love
It's always a
that.
treat.
Okay, I have one more question, which has got to be about your macaroni and cheese, because I'm a huge macaroni and cheese enthusiast, and
Yeah.
I've made many different versions. And in my mind, I've really never met one I didn't like. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But I'm always curious about. So, for example, my granddaddy's mac and cheese recipe is like a family heirloom, and he just uses all cheddar. So I make
Yep.
that one very often. But yeah, I'm just curious how you got to your mac and cheese recipe.
Is yours an egg bake, or is it like a
No egg. It's just like a bechamel, flour and butter, and then milk and cheddar, and then
yeah?
and then he bakes it with
See,
more cheddar.
that's exactly what I do. Mine
Yeah.
is a bechamel, so
Yeah.
it's more loose
Yeah.
in and creamy, but that bechamel is powerfully enriched with Parmesan
Oh,
Mhm.
and cheddar. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's like hints of garlic,
Mhm.
onion powder, to really bring that
Yeah.
that flavor, that sweetness through without the chunks,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then on top is like goo gobs of more parm and more cheddar,
Oh my gosh. I'm
and
gonna
then
have to try this for
and then
maybe for Thanksgiving even. I love that you include Monterey also, because there's something about it that just kind of melts a little bit better than cheddar. It has such a gooey melt to it.
right. Yep. And so a friend of mine, she lives in Dallas, and I guess she just got the book, and she made the mac and cheese, and she said that her husband and her kids basically just housed the whole pan.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I think this has been such a wonderful hour. Ruby, did you have anything else before we wrap up?
No, well, I forgot to ask, like those were, I usually like to ask people if there's anything else I should have asked, and I forgot to ask that. But so is there anything else that I should have asked you? Anything you'd like to offer? So our viewers, readers will, can appreciate what you're trying to offer, through your book, your cookbook.
I think, just really get it and enjoy it, because on different levels you're going to enjoy it for different reasons. The family aspect, the social justice aspect of it, but more than that, the cooking, because even in the beginning, how I was talking about that, although 2020 may have been hard, in a lot of ways, but it really refocused me into the cooking, and that's sort of where I was able to find my peace, So I hope that this book certainly brings you peace, and that I hope that you're able to share it and feed each other with love, and respect each other.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much to both of you, and congratulations again. It's a
Yes.
very, very special book. I'm really excited to have it in my kitchen, and I think we all are. So thank you so much, Chris and Ruby. Thank you so much for joining us as well. It's just been a really, really wonderful hour. So I hope you both have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much to everyone that tuned in, and we will talk to all of you again soon.
Right.
Thanks.